Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jason, once again joined by our co-host Scott Michael Childers. How are you this fine day, Scott?
I am just as fine as the fine day is.
It's a fine day. It's rainy and yucky outside, and I love that weather, so it puts me in a good mood, except for the joints hurting and whatnot from being old.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you don't care about that. You care about writing. So while we were doing our pre-planning, and we actually do pre-plan sometimes, it may not seem like it at all to you listeners, we were bouncing around some ideas, and we brought up elevator pitches. And I think elevator pitches are a really important thing to know about and be prepared for, but I don't think that can fill a full 15 to 20 minutes. So we'll expand that a bit to marketing and promoting your written works.
Well, I think this will be kind of a broad overview from small to large types of marketing.
Yes.
And it's not just of your works, but also of yourself.
Of yourself, going up the proverbial elevator.
There you go. So you mentioned elevator. Let's start with the elevator pitch, or what some people will probably end up calling the Twitter pitch. Should we define it first?
Sure. To me, an elevator pitch is one or two sentences that describes your book.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good way to put it. A Twitter pitch would be a little less, since you can't fit...
You can fit two very small sentences
You
in
could.
But the goal is, it is the foot in the door, and it's not going to cover everything, right?
It's going to touch on a character, a theme, the basics.
Well, and it's really just, here's my intro point, and hopefully that gets the other person excited to ask questions to build up a real conversation about whatever work it is.
Right, and it's important. Well, it's important lots of times. If you run into an agent and they say, "What's your book about?" you can say, "My book is about..." I'll use mine.
Okay.
My book. And that's what you don't do. Don't pause and think about it. Practice it. Mm-hmm. My book is about a teenage boy who has a near-death experience and returns from that experience with healing powers and a mission from heaven.
Yeah.
You need to be able to just say that as if it's as natural as breathing or introducing yourself. And you'll use it when you run into people who say, "What's your book about?" You'll use it when you're at an author fair trying to sell your book to other people. You'll use it when you say, "Hey everybody, I wrote a book," and your parents say, "What's your book about?" "Well, here's what my book's about. Now go buy it."
Yeah. It's supposed to be the conversation starter. The thing that gets interest. It is not going to be the full back cover blurb at all. It is really just a quick thing. Because you only have... elevator pitch comes from you're in the elevator with someone you want to sell something to, and you've got to get their interest before they get off that elevator. Now, at cons or other things where you might be talking with agents or publishers, you don't have a lot of time.
Right.
You want a quick intro, leave a card, or say, "Hey, look, here's my pitch. If you're interested, let's do drinks or something." Or even they'll say, we'll do something else.
Yeah, they might say, "Hey, that sounds good. Send a query letter."
Yeah. Along with elevator pitches, I've heard a couple of different points of view on the idea of saying it is this plus this. For example, and this is not a real life example, my next book is Harry Potter meets The Simpsons and crosses over with Jane Austen. It's trying to provoke the type of tone, the type of setting, the type of world by using well-known examples. I was like, Batman 66 meets Star Trek. Okay, it's got to be campy, over the top, space opera, possibly. It's evocative of things, but it's not telling you much detail. I've heard some people say, don't ever do that. Then I've heard other people say that's the best way to sell a book to someone, because they don't have to think too hard about it. I think one of the problems, and you can pitch in here, Jason, it's the idea of saying, well, it's Harry Potter plus something else. As long as you're not trying to say it's going to sell like Harry Potter, you're evoking that type of story, that type of journey that the main character goes through, that might be a little bit more acceptable.
Perhaps. It's hard to tell. If an agent feels like you're just trying to latch to a trend that might be a turnoff, If you go up and say, this is Twilight meets 50 Shades.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And you say it's going to sell as much as both of those combined.
Yeah. To me personally, I'm not a fan of that. I can't say whether or not that works.
Yeah.
I think to me it works better to say it's written in the style of. You might say this is similar to a Dan Brown book, or has similar pacing to a John Green book or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would leave that in the elevator pitch. I think if somebody comes up to me and says, I wrote the next Harry Potter, or that you don't want to say at all. You don't want to say, I'm the next Stephen King. But that's a little different.
Yeah. If at all possible, I go back to Jason's example where it was character, really rough outline of story arc and motivation, right?
Yeah.
Just really boom, 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 quick, and then all the details come from later queries or discussions.
The one thing about an elevator pitch, to go back to what you said, if you do have a comparative example, you can convey the tone that way, where with mine you wouldn't.
That's right. But if you added it's a story, a young boy loses all of this stuff, and it's written in the same pacing as a John Green.
Yeah. It's hard to say. Use your own judgment.
And practice it.
Practice.
Throw it against some of your friends. Say, I'm going to tell you a pitch, especially if they don't know your next book. They say, here's what I'm working on, and see if they go, what? Or if they go, oh, that sounds interesting. If they have something other than just sheer confusion, you're probably on the right track.
Yeah. Good advice.
Should we move up the elevator to the opposite end? The long form marketing?
Yeah.
All right, so we've started our elevator pitch. And now let's say you have a chance to, and this probably isn't going to be with a publisher, probably not going to be with an agent. Now you're probably talking with, say, a newspaper or something like that, something else, where you have a chance to do more long form marketing.
So now we're looking at elevator pitch is more selling the concept. Now you're selling yourself and your product.
Right. Elevator is like one product. Mm-hmm. And the long form type of marketing that we're going to talk about now is yourself, your career, your expertise, your, everything about you, the author. Sometimes you might get asked to be part of a speakers bureau. Maybe you're part of a guild. Both Jason and I are part of our state's Writers Guild, and there's a speakers bureau. When people are looking for speakers in there, they want a complete picture of you. They don't want an elevator pitch. They are going to invest money in you coming in as an expert on something, or a storyteller with something meaningful to say. So an elevator pitch in those cases is going to be worthless. So and you could say, hey, I wrote this neat story about some stuff that happened in my hometown. Or you could say, I have extensive research in railroad towns in Nebraska in the era right before the breakout of World War II. Now, which one sounds like a speaker who would get invited in somewhere outside of their parents' social circle?
Right. It's not a casual, hey, I'm a writer, let me come talk. It's more like applying for a job almost. You want to have a more detailed description, not necessarily a resume, but a list of accomplishments. And
I'd say it is your resume in these cases. And it's going to be more statements like the one I made. And there's going to be, what are the awards you received? What's your training? How long have you been a writer? This is an expanded biography, basically. And you have to toot your own horn. You cannot be humble on these, right? You have to prove to someone who doesn't know you from anyone why they would invest money and time to bring you to their event to talk to the people that they have a reputation with. They are staking their reputation on who you are, so you need to give them all the ammunition they need to pull the trigger and bring you in.
You want to answer the questions, who am I, and why should you care who I am, and why do you want to talk to me?
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this mentality is also something you should have on your blog page, or your writer's page, or whatever. Anything you have long form, that has about me, not your projects, but your about me or that. Again, write it like, for me, I have the nonfiction, so I can put the expert in that section. But you also have to say, my stories talk about these emotions or these connections or these type of, if you're a horror writer, what type, it's the big picture.
And it's hard. We're writers. Writers are generally introverts. We don't like selling ourselves, but it is really important. I know that, you might think, it's like, well, hey, I wrote this book. It's a good book. My friends tell me it's a good book, so if I just say, hey, I'm going to go sell this book, people will come to you. But it's just like you say, they're not going to come to you. Why do they care about your book just because you wrote it? They need to know what it's about, why it's important for them to read it. Mm-hmm. And like your example with you, I researched this small town, and I wrote about the historical events in this town, and it's important if you're from that area.
Yeah. And let's do something if you're a genre writer, science fiction, or fantasy. You could talk about the type of worlds that you write about.
Yeah.
Are your worlds full of epic fantasy? Are they full of amazing creatures? Are they full of interesting magic systems? Are they hard science fiction, which is based in lots of scientific research? You really got to lay it out there, who you are as an author in those type of pieces. It's not just a collection of elevator pitches.
Yeah. And if you have this information publicly available, people will find it and call upon you. If you write genre and you say, this is what I write, this is the type of fantasy I write, you can at that point say, I think other authors, it's comparative to, there's going to be local science fiction conventions looking for speakers, looking for panelists, and they'll contact you.
Yeah, and then there's something that some people use. I find this more in at least I've seen it more in the artist realm. My wife is an artist, so I see it more in her world than mine. But some people have, I want to say, a 3-sectioned bio, because different types of shows for them require different lengths. Hers is 3 paragraphs, and depending on the requirement, she can just drop the last paragraph or the last 2 paragraphs. And so she has that one. So for us authors, the 1 paragraph might be that bio at the back of the book. Mm-hmm. And then the second one would be maybe recent honors or, a little bit more in depth for what was covered in the first paragraph, and then same with the third. And then depending on what it is that you need a bio for, you chop off that last paragraph. You write it to be cut apart that way. So that's something you may want to have in your back pocket, because then you're not constantly rewriting your bio to fit this submission or that submission, right. or like the paragraph that's attached to Jason and my pictures on the website is very short. And then I would add another section of that to complete a back of the book bio. And then another section for my upcoming Wikipedia entry, which will never happen.
You gotta dream big.
Yeah. So those are the quick marketing. Mm-hmm. And then there's this big marketing of who you are. And you gotta be able to do both.
And there's so much more to cover when it comes to promoting, more than we have time for in this single podcast. But do you have any closing thoughts on it?
I think this takes practice to be able to write those different types of things. And I'm sure I think we've got some people in mind that we might try to bring on in the near future if schedules allow.
Yeah.
That'll talk more about some of the more finer points of these. If you have questions, let us know.
We can either answer or we can find an answer.
Yeah.
I think I do have a closing thought. When you're a writer, you have to be your own advocate.
Yes, I agree.
You have to be ready to pitch your book at all times and have the appropriate pitch for the appropriate group. Some people might want more details, and just be ready with them. And don't be afraid to look for speaking engagements, but just, like we said, be prepared to explain what you're an expert at and why you're the right person for the speaking gig.
It's like, basically, you are the main character in this real-world fiction. So your job is to create that character sketch and make it, why should we read about you as a character?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So thanks for listening, and check us out on the web at www.writegoodbooks.com/podcast.
See you next time.